Hello, and welcome to this demo about the Qlik SaaS SAP Accelerators. In this video, what you're going to see is extracting data from SAP into Snowflake, and then using Qlik SaaS Analytics to integrate with Amazon SageMaker to make predictions. Let's go ahead and get started by discussing Qlik Cloud data integration. So let's go ahead and dive into the first stage of our SAP accelerators, which is the Qlik Cloud Data Services transformation process to get the data from our raw SAP information into analytics ready data marts. And today we're going to focus specifically on the data we need for the orders to cash process. Now, if we start all the way back on the left, you can see that we are going to be pulling the data out of an SAP system. And we're going to be using the SAP extractors. Whether we access this via transport or via ODP, we can pull that information out of either an S4HANA system or an ECC system and start prepping it for analytics ready information. Now, when we go up a level, what we're going to see is our landing layer. And this is where we take the raw information out of a SAP system by process. So in this case, these are the fact tables that we will need in order to get the information that we need for orders to cash. And of course, orders to cash contains order information, contains shipment information, billing information, and account receivable information, as well as various entities around statuses, header statuses, line item details, things of that nature. Now, the first thing that we're doing in this process is we are actually applying a set of rules. And this rule will rename the raw information from SAP, which are things like to Liz 11 VA header, into something that's more readable like sales document header. So in this first stage, we are doing this for the information that we need. As previously stated, the information that we need is going to be broken into these different sections. Orders to cash, landing, these are the fact tables that we need for the orders to cash process. Then we have dimensional landing, and there are two types of dimensions inside of SAP. Some that are ready for CDC or change data capture that are called delta enabled dimensions, and others that are not CDC capable that we will need to load as trigger based. So we call those full load dimensions. So that is a very important process because even though we start with several different dimensional entities, we do blend that together later into a single entity. So what we can see here is that we have started by loading the information, and let's take a look at some of our dimensions here. So if we open up our full load, for that, we can see that we, in this case, have a quite a long list of these full load dimensions that we have applied our rule to go ahead and rename. And again, all we're doing in this stage is getting that information from its raw state in SAP landed into Snowflake and just changing the names of the columns to make them, the names of the tables that we'll create in Snowflake to make them more readable. That's what we're talking about with stage one. Now, we then go to the next stage, which is where we go to the storage later. Now, this is a non-materialized view on top of the now landed data in Snowflake from SAP that we start to add some value to the process. So let's go ahead and open up one of these. And we'll take a look again at this full load of dimensions. And what we're going to see within it is that we are taking now we took previously the raw table names or extractor names and turned them into business friendly table names in Snowflake, but now we're going to do that same thing to work with the columns. So if I come down here and look at something like employee, things like personnel sub area is a lot more easy to read than BTRTL, and works is personnel area, or MOLGA is country grouping. So we've added these dimensions some context with friendly names, and we're doing this via a rules dictionary over here. And what's interesting about this is that we're able to do this renaming at a individual, we call it data set level. And the reason why that's important is not all things are always called the same in SAP. Depending, these German shorthand 5-digit codes, depending on where you're using them, may have different context. Personnel number, PERNR, sometimes can be partner, sometimes can be internal employee, sometimes it can be sales employee. So it's important that we know when to use which metadata mapping. And that's how these different rules are set up by these different data sets to apply the correct rule that we've extracted from the SAP metadata layer. Now, the other thing that we do at this layer is we come in and we add things like keys. So we identify now, for the purpose of change data tracking and eventually dimensional transformation later into the data mart stage, what are the different keys? So if I'm looking at employee master, if I'm looking at something like plant master, what are the keys? What are the drivers? And we need to, we need to understand that information, because that is what's going to drive all of the the later on combinations. Now, this is SAP data. Sometimes SAP data is bad because this is IDES, and so we have to handle what happens when a key really isn't unique, or when it's null, or when when there's a duplicate. So we actually have the ability to create calculations here that will handle and process those situations. So we're doing a little bit of data pre-filtering, and we're setting up the keys for later work. Now, we've done this for both types of dimensions, both the full loads and the delta capable loads, as well as the fact tables that we need from orders to cash. Then we step in and we start using our transformation layer. And our transformation layer is where we start, in this case, we're going to combine all of our different dimensions, whether they're you know, delta enabled or whether they're full load, into a single set of conformed dimensions. We're also going to add a little bit more capability. For example, at this layer, if I come and take a look at something like my chart of accounts text, what I will see is I'm applying a table level translation. And this is taking data specifically from the language and is pivoting it from one column with a whole bunch of different languages in it that I have to use a where clause to filter, pivoting them out to individual columns so the analyst can just drag the text of description that they need into their dashboard. So that is being executed and pushed down on Snowflake, and we're doing this transformation again within this transform layer, which is great. Now we can also do additional things like calling snowpark functions. So we've got a table level transformation that we're calling via a function that is also being pushed down to Snowflake. So all of these transformations, along with what we did at the storage layer, are all being done as non-materialized views on top of that data we pulled in to Snowflake from the SAP layer. Everything's running on Snowflake, everything's 100% push down, which is fantastic. So we're adding value here, whether some data sets can come straight across, others need to be pivoted to get the text into a more analytical ready information. But that's what we're doing here at this transformation layer with our dimensions. Now, once we have our dimensions into a common set of dimensions, we then take the fact tables and the dimensional tables and we put it all together in another transformation. Again, this is non-materialized. It could be materialized if we want it to be, but for what we're doing here, it is non-materialized. And most importantly, we now have one set of information. We have all those data sets. Everything is transformed into readable columns. Everything is transformed into readable uh, you know, uh, columns of information and individual fields. But now we start going and pulling together all of those different keys. So if I wanted to understand for sales documents what entities are related to sales documents, and I can see here that I've got different keys that tie to my sales documents, that tie to my employees or to my sales organization or to custom currency. And all of this now is mapped and modeled inside of this transformation. So this is how all the data fits together. So we've modeled this all for the orders to cash process, all of the different dimensions, whether they were delta, whether they were trigger based, and the fact tables, it's all been blended together now into a single model. Once we have that model, we get to go to the final stage. And the final stage is where we now turn that information into those analytical ready data marts. So if I take a look at the final stage, what we will see is we have something called the orders to cash data mart. And inside of that are a whole bunch of star schemas that describe different processes within the orders to cash process. So sales document line items. Now, an SAP person would look at this and go, hey, those kind of look like BW cubes. And that's kind of the thought. We want to make this information familiar to people who've worked with SAP before. But if I'm looking at sales documents, I'm going to have ship to customer, sold to customer, bill to customer, sales documents, currency, sales office organization, materials, and things of that nature. And I can see down here, the other thing that we're doing with this is we are taking all of the dimensional lookups, all of those flakes, all of the attributes, and consolidating them into a single dimension. So I have one material dimension that is conformed across the entirety of my orders to cash process, as well as the other entities in the SAP Accelerator, so that I just have one material. I have one set of customer information. I have one set of sales office that is combining all this information. So I don't have to do join after join after join. And so what we end up with because of this are these easy to use drag and drop analytical models in data marts that are ready to go and ready to pass over to our analytics layer. And then we can start turning this process data into analytical content. Now that we've gotten our information transformed and ready for analytics, let's go ahead and take a look at what those analytics can do, as well as the AWS SageMaker predictions. We're going to go ahead now and start inside of the Orders to Cash Analytics app. And what we can see here is a list of our sheets and dashboards related to the entire process around Orders to Cash. Again, as we discussed earlier, Orders to Cash covers orders, fulfillment, billing, and payments. In fact, let's go ahead and look at the main dashboard that captures all of those metrics in a single screen, being able to analyze the entire breadth of the Orders to Cash process with a single view. Now, this is very difficult. In fact, when we're talking about this, what we're able to see is a whole bunch of information. We've got 13 different fact tables. We have 18 different dimensions that we're all blending together into a single consolidated view because of the power of Qlik. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at a few of these if we want, whether I want to look at entities regarding, how we're doing with our orders, how we're doing with our shipments, how we're doing with our billings analysis, how we're doing with our customers paying us on time or not. But really what we want to do is take a look specifically at a single order. And what's powerful about this is I can see the process now of when an order was created, scheduled, broken into multiple deliveries because the goods weren't in inventory, as well as the payment information. Now, if I looked at this with a standard tool, I would just see that it took a customer 194 days to pay the bill. But what they wouldn't see without doing a whole lot of digging, in fact, in SAP, this is 40 different screens to pull up this information, dumping to Excel and then mashing together. But because we have access to all these different facts and all these different dimensions, we can see that, well, yes, it took 6 months for the customer to pay the bill, but it's because they didn't get all of their products on time. In fact, one order was split into 3 different shipments, 3 different bills, and 3 different payments. But the customer paid the bill in 1 to 2 days when they received it, which is fantastic. So again, context is key here when looking at this entire orders to cash process. But again, this is just the start. Speaking of the fact that we know that orders were late in getting delivered, wouldn't it be really interesting if we could understand some of the predictions around that? And in fact, unselecting that, we can now run these SageMaker predictions. So we've run all of the orders through SageMaker, and it's predicted that out of those 15,000 orders, or almost 16,000 orders, almost 4,000 of those are going to be late, and that would impact 440 of our customers. And so this is really the power. It's great that we are able to look backwards with what has happened in the past, but with the SageMaker integration, taking this data from Snowflake that we've transformed through the Qlik engine and then passing it to SageMaker, we can now predict what's going to be happening in the future. So this is really the power of this integrated solution when we're talking about fusing the power of the Qlik SaaS platform with the data integration and data analytics, all running on top of Snowflake, and then extending it with the power of Amazon SageMaker to bring it all together and look into the future.